pass on to Anne Beitifeur for the rebuttal, but just to say afterwards we'll be taking questions and comments from the audience, so yeah.
Thank you very much, Amrita, and also thank you very much for inviting me to this great venue and to this very interesting conversation. I'm really honored to be here. And I just want to make 3 points. I want to say that I thought that Marx's presentation of capitalism was, in a sense, nostalgic. The kind of capitalism he talks about is something that actually, in my view, is almost extinct. That sounds extreme, but I'll explain myself in a minute. It's a kind of capitalism that depends on profits. And profits, too, in my view, are a minority preoccupation in our world today. Today, capitalism today is mainly concerned with capital gains. And capital gains are very different from profits. Capital gains are the money that you make from money. Capital gains it's rent-seeking, basically. And most capitalists today, people like Peter Thiel, for example, would be appalled if he had to do the things that Marx's company friends do. That is to engage, on the one hand, with land, to grow wheat for hamburgers or cows for beef or whatever, where you have to engage with the land and with the climate and with the weather, and on the other hand, engagement with labor, which in itself presents challenges to the capitalist, as David has rightly said. Most of today's capitalists engage with neither of those and make money from money. And finance, I thought that as well as missing out on labor and labor's role within capitalism, as David rightly said, Marx left out an enormous part of capitalism, which is the finance sector, which now operates almost independently of these entrepreneurial institutions, small companies that are a minority preoccupation at the moment. So capital gains, making money from money, rent-seeking is actually the major preoccupation of capitalists today, and competition is also irrelevant to that. Again, as Peter Thiel has said, competition is yesterday's story. Google, there's only one search engine in the whole world, and it's the Google search engine, and it has this massive monopoly and makes billions of dollars out of it. And anyone who wants to mess around with land and labor to make a few profits in today's capitalism is viewed as faintly ridiculous. So, unless you've invented PayPal or Google or one of those very big global oligopolies, you really aren't considered part of today's capitalist elite. So this business of making profits, of hiring labor, of building an entrepreneurial, what's the name of the fellow that invented the vacuum cleaner man? Dyson. I mean, Dyson is such an old-fashioned, antiquated character. But what a wonderful man. He is innovative. He does worry about the finance sector. He'd like to make us new products which would be useful to us. But actually, he can't do that very effectively within today's capitalist system. The other thing that I wanted to say about Marx's contribution was that he made references to savings and to pools of savings. Now, that again is a very antiquated idea, because as you know, and as many of you know, savings are not needed for investment. And they haven't been needed for investment since 1694, when the banking system began to evolve in this country. And so what we have is a finance system which is able to create credit, and that has persuaded and captured governments and altered regulations and management of the financial system so that it can create vast amounts of credit ad infinitum, so that today global debt, which of course is the other side of credit, is 400% of global income. And this unrestrained creation of credit for the purpose of increasing rents and for obtaining even higher rents is something that is well beyond the everyday entrepreneur thinking up bright ideas and wanting to innovate. We don't have pools of savings. The sovereign wealth funds may have collected the surplus of their countries and may well be investing these abroad as they do, but the real power belongs to those who are based in Wall Street or in the City of London, who are able to engage in shadow banking activities way outside of the regulatory system and to create money themselves and to create the capital gains that they can make from that money without having to have any recourse to anybody's savings tin. So that, I just want to say that, and that is what, in my view, utterly corrupts capitalism. I mean, I have lots of problems with capitalism. I absolutely agree with David about the conflict with labor and so on. But for me, the corruption of capitalism now is so completely pervasive that and is so now corrupting the whole of society that I think that unless we, well, I am perfectly a bit pessimistic about what we can do about it because we don't understand it, because it tends to be intangible, beyond our reach. One of my objections to Piketty, by the way, is that Piketty is very good at adding up, like an accountant, all of that which is tangible and talking about it. The French interpretation of the book Capital is about estates, is about that thing which you tangibly can get hold of and count as an asset or a liability, when actually the mass of wealth and power that exists in today's world is totally intangible, is beyond sight. I was talking to Adam Curtis, who wants to make a film about money, about how hard it is to visualize what it is that's going on in this world today. And because of that, we don't really understand it, and we can't get a grip on it, and we can't grasp it. And our education system, and in particular our economics profession, has been set up and has been profoundly corrupted to prevent us actually from really understand it. If you look at most economic textbooks, as Steve Keenan and others has shown, there is no discussion of what credit is, of finance is. I mean, there's no discussion in most textbooks of deflation right now. Most textbooks are absolutely obsessed by inflation because it's something that creditors absolutely hate, but don't discuss deflation. And right now, the global economy faces a very, very dire threat of deflation. So we have a real problem with the corruption, in my view, of the economics profession, but of all aspects of society. I have to say, I have many issues with the church, and the church has been corrupted to an extent, but it is one of the few social institutions that hasn't been completely captured. The state has been captured. The political system is being captured. I mean, look at our parliament. It's been hollowed out. It's meaningless. Its members do nothing. They have nothing to do. When I was young, in my youth, members of parliament allocated resources to the health system or to the broadcasting system or to, and they managed the regulation of labor and they managed the regulation of finance. They don't do any of that anymore. And who would want to sit on those green benches with such meaningless activity? And I'm at the moment engaged in supporting Argentina in its struggle with Paul Singer, who is a billionaire vulture fund in Wall Street, who funded Mitt Romney's presidential campaign. What a very lousy investment that was, and dragged an awful lot of other billionaires into that morass with him. But who has bribed, in my view, and corrupted the American legal system. There was a time when the American legal system was held in great regard around the world. But the Supreme Court, the secondary court, the appeals court, and this small court in New York, which is demanding of Argentina, Argentina is just, it's a complicated story, but Argentina used to pay her creditors through a bank based in New York. Paul Singer has persuaded the courts to tell the bank that they can't use Argentina's money in the bank to pay creditors, mainly in Italy, until Argentina pays Paul Singer 100 times more than they owe to their existing creditors under existing agreements. So this bank has defaulted on its obligations to its client that put money in the bank in the hope of it being spent in the right way. And so Argentina has now appointed another bank as its agent in its relationship with creditors, and that bank is based in Buenos Aires. And a couple of weeks ago, Judge Grieser accused Argentina of being in contempt of his court because as a sovereign parliament they were able to pass a law to establish a bank where they could put their money and pay their creditors. So we have the corruption of the United States' legal system, the capture and corruption of it, not by entrepreneurs making goodies and doing useful things, but by a finance sector which is remote and beyond control. So, and I wanted to make, how many more minutes have I got? Want to make a really important point about growth. And I want my friends here, because I know you're all lefties, really, please never use the word growth. It's a word that was invented as recently as the 1960s, 1967, by a man called Samuel Britton and by the OECD. It wasn't in use before that. Before that, economists, and in particular Keynes, used to worry about, for example, the level of unemployment or the level of employment, the level of output, the level of income. If it was too low, you were supposed to act to increase it. If it was too high and it was inflationary, economists should act to decrease it. So what you cared about were levels. And at a time of full employment, at the height of what is known in economics as the golden age of economics, the OECD and Samuel Britton said, no, let's get this economy to grow 4%. That was to ask the government, the economy to grow beyond its capacity. And that they did, and we then got inflation for which the unions were blamed. So I want us to be very careful not to use this word. We may talk about how we would like to see more employment. We may want to see more output. We might want to see more and higher incomes. But don't use the word growth, because then you're buying into a neoliberal concept, which is dangerous for all of us, and in particular for the ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you.